What's up, everybody? Thanks for checking out this segment of the main show. Be sure to check out the full EXFIL podcast at youtube.com/xpmedia now.
At the elephant in the Tarkov world right now, which is these Nvidia filters, as it were. And if this is the first time you're hearing about filters and anything that's sort of third party to the game, so to be clear, the reason this topic interests us is, and there's plenty of things that happen in the game that we don't necessarily want to talk about because we'd like to talk about stuff that's interesting to us and can help people get better. So I want to start this off by saying that we're not advocating for third-party programs that modify your game. In fact, we're pretty much against anything that would be considered cheating, which a lot of third-party modifications are considered cheating. But what we're talking about here at a very high level, and we'll dig into it, is Nvidia filters. And basically what this is, you can use the Nvidia control panel. This was actually tweeted out by Battlestate that they were going to have it turned off with the patch 12.5 release, but Nvidia ended up doing it early, and that's why it's flared up, or you're hearing people talk about filters or color correction. And so basically you could use this third-party software, not the Battlestate video settings, but the filters, to adjust things like saturation, sharpness, brightness, gamma, beyond what the game allows you to do. There's a bunch of camps in this. There's people that use it for colorblind correction. There's people that use it to basically completely wash the game out so that you can see other players and scabs really easy. There's some people that use it to make the game look as pretty, quote unquote, as possible, and everything in between that. Ultimately, there's a few aspects of this particular decision that we thought were really interesting. And for those of you that listened to the very early episodes of XP Media or went back and listened when we were talking about other games and we kind of morphed into Tarkov, but we really like the business aspects and the conversation about the company trying to make these changes as well. So at a high level, that's what's going on. That's why we wanted to talk about it. Again, I alluded to it, but basically, and you kind of have to read between the lines here a little bit. But what happened was on the 20th of April, Battlestate released a tweet that said, "We didn't ask Nvidia to switch off Nvidia filters yet. It's planned with the 12.5 patch." So you got to understand, at least for me, the importance are on a couple things. One is the word yet. So they were planning to ask Nvidia to turn them off. And second, they've actually leaked pictures of the advanced color settings that they will be releasing with that patch. When I look at that, and I don't know about how you feel about this, Eric, but I look at that and say, this was planned, it was happening. You know, Nvidia maybe trying to get ahead of the curve and not look like the bad guy when it shuts off. Maybe they wanted to do it early so that they could put the heat back on Battlestate making the decision and not necessarily them. But it's just super interesting at a high level. So when you saw or heard all of this happening, like, what was your initial take on this whole deal?
I thought it was kind of interesting. To be honest with you, I don't use Nvidia filters for anything. I really have not, up until this point, had a super strong opinion on this topic. I generally am annoyed by the GeForce Experience program itself. It causes more problems.
Hey, there's an update. Hey, there's an update. Sorry to interrupt you like GeForce does.
Yeah, and over the years, it's caused more problems in games than it has fixed for me personally. And, you know, maybe that's different now. And so maybe it's time to check out that as a setting. In general, I just have kind of ignored it and don't do anything with it. However, when I did hear about this, you know, it was interesting to reach out and get some different opinions about it, because I think that from a basic level, why would I want to, you know, adjust the game beyond what the game can do? If you're going to do that, you have to ask yourself, why am I really doing that, right? And there are some valid reasons for that. Like you say, if you have a color blindness challenge and you can use a third-party application to make the game playable for you, then I think that's cool. Then I'm down with that.
Absolutely.
You know, because that just gets more people playing the game and everybody wants that. If you don't have a reason like that, then I think you have to ask yourself why you're really doing it. I'm not going to take the position that I think that it's necessarily good or bad, but you have to look at why. And I think that's really where, if you can ask yourself, why do I have to implement a third-party filter on the graphics to change the way that the game looks from the way that the developers originally intended it to be played? Why am I doing that? And that's kind of where I kind of land on the initial thoughts on this.
And I think that's the biggest challenge, right, is where this line is. Because when you dig into the hardest question in all of this, and I know that we're going to get asked our opinion on it, and we'll give it, but the question is, you're identifying on the personal level, like on a per-person basis, why would I do this? And then the overall question is, should it be allowed, right? And that's the interesting territory that we're wading in. And Battlestate waded in an interesting way, and Nvidia is handling it in an interesting way. No one really wants to draw the hard line on this issue. And I can look back in my gaming career, having played competitive Counter-Strike, and then stayed up in some other competitive FPS titles where, you have to submit configs and specs on monitors, and there's only certain things allowed. And all of these things go into creating the most fair PvP environment available, or esports environment. And this is one of those issues. And nobody wants to be the team, game, company that draws the line, because it's really challenging, right? And it's like, I know players out there that will do anything and everything to get an advantage. We all know there's people that cheat in video games. It's kind of the same mindset, but there's people who are unwilling to cheat, but they will go right up to that line. And there's some people that argue that the Nvidia filters, or things like taking your voice meter settings and equalizing high and low frequencies to be closer together so you can hear footsteps better, would argue that those types of things by a third-party program, not the game settings, would be cheating. There's people that argue that. And there's other people that would say, well, if Battlestate doesn't specifically disallow it and they're not banning you for doing it, it's allowed. And those two camps go like this. I don't know if you heard that, but that was my fist smashing into each other, because there's really not any space in between, and that's the biggest challenge with this. I wanted to break it down like that because you may hear about filters or Nvidia or color correction, and if you're not keeping up on Reddit or, Twitch streams and all that kind of stuff, you may have no idea what people are talking about, and this is the battle between it's cheating or it's okay to do anything and everything that isn't, like, explicitly disallowed. So within all of that, I'm like, well, Nvidia turned it off early so that they put the onus back on Battlestate. Battlestate's saying that, well, we did ask them to turn it off at a future time, but they did it early. So it's like you got the two big players saying, they did it. They did it. Which leaves the player base to fight it out amongst themselves over something that isn't implemented in the game yet. And the funniest part about the whole thing is we could get patch 12.5 and get the ability to correct it the exact same way that Nvidia is doing it right now. We don't know how it's going to be.
I think the reason why Battlestate wanted Nvidia to turn it off really revolves around creating that fair PvP environment that you were talking about. It just seems to me like if you can get an advantage from a third-party application, there are a number of things that are not allowed for that to happen, right? Like we don't allow aimbots. We don't allow some kind of tracker programs. That's hacking, right? Oh, a hacker killed me, whatever. But if my filters have set me up so I can see different, that's not considered that. So, or it is, depending on your opinion. These kinds of things fall into that camp. And I think that Nvidia really made an interesting business choice by allowing their software to adjust how game publishers have published their games. And because of that, it kind of puts game publishers in a tough spot. Battlestate really has to make a decision. Okay, people like what they can do with these graphic settings. Are we going to lose players because the game doesn't natively allow it to happen? And they might lose players because of that, or they might not. But they still have to keep that in mind as they're making graphics decisions. And on top of that, then it goes to, okay, if we as Battlestate implement this next round of filtering into the game client itself, how does that affect our content that we have planned for the game? So if we have cultists planned for the game, for example, that are in the dark that you can't see right now, but you could adjust your filtering settings so maybe that you could see something, how does that affect content in the game that was intended to be played or experienced in a certain way that can't be played or experienced in that same way now? And so this is a very complicated question. It's not just, oh, I'm cheating or I'm not cheating. It's really not that simple. It's a pretty complicated design question. And Battlestate is kind of giving their stance, right? They're turning off this third-party ability, but adding some controls, right? Some things. And I think it's probably more important long-term for the game, in my opinion, or any game, to have the publisher control these kind of things versus a third-party add-on. I personally have never been a fan of a third-party add-on affecting gameplay from a playability perspective. And I know that sounds weird, double talk, but let me kind of explain it a little bit.
So I find that fascinating, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but I find it fascinating because we both played a game that is very affected by third-party add-ons that are sort of endorsed by the publisher, but often get turned down. Some of them get brought into the game, etc. Right? And it's things I'm thinking of World of Warcraft, the add-on system, and there's things like if you go PvP in World of Warcraft, you can download add-ons that will tell you the specs and the classes of the other team you're playing against, which someone playing in the base version of the game, they don't get that knowledge. So this is that's really interesting to hear you say that, because I actually feel very similarly, but this is a very interesting. So yeah, I'm hopeful that you're going to dig into that point a little bit.
That's kind of where I was going with this, because what I was going to say is that I am not a fan of that kind of add-on. When I PvP'd in WoW, I didn't use those kinds of add-ons for a long time until I became at such a disadvantage that it was necessary, because the community had decided that it was almost a de facto game feature. And so kind of where I was going to go with this discussion about add-ons is I am not a fan of add-ons that affect game playability. And what I mean by that is fair PvP or PvE in the game. I'm totally fine with add-ons that create databases of information about how the game is being played that you can use to make decisions to play the game, but are not real-time effects on how the game is played or what the game is designed to do while you play it. Now, I know that's kind of confusing, but basically what I'm saying is if it's an informational thing that can help you make a decision that's not necessarily in the heat of the moment of the play, I think it's okay, if that makes sense.
It does, and let me see if I can further clarify, because what immediately came to mind was raiding in WoW, right? Because those are add-ons that absolutely affect the gameplay, because they're modifying your UI to give you information you wouldn't otherwise be able to get so quickly. The interesting part about that, though, is it's not a PvP scenario. That is you versus the game. So is that the key difference here, the key qualifier, is that it's fair PvP that's in mind? Because that's kind of where I go. But to the way you explained it, I guess I'm just asking you that question. Would that be a qualifier for you that you would want to distinguish? Because in WoW, I love the raid add-ons. They make it a much more relaxing and enjoyable experience, but they're absolutely affecting the gameplay compared to the PvP ones we just talked about.
I think it's a lot easier for a game developer to design a PvE experience in any game that allows add-ons around an add-on that the community has decided is basically part of the game. And World of Warcraft and many other games have done that. The game developers have just acknowledged the fact that everyone who plays is going to use this. If they were to take it away, the community would be very upset. So there's no reason to say that they're going to take it away. They're just going to design around it. But that's in a PvE scenario. And most PvP games are very conscious of keeping PvP a pretty level playing field and a pretty vanilla experience with the game client. So I would say I have no problems with PvE-based games and add-ons that affect it because I don't think that it's a big deal. It's PvE, who cares? But PvP is really about, I bring my best to the table, you bring your best to the table, you're better than me, you win. It's not, I bring my best to the table, you bring your best plus 2 or 3 advantages that I don't have to the table, and you win. If that's the way you like to play, I'm not going to judge you, but I'm just saying that's not the way that I like to play. I like to know that when I bring my best to the table, the other person that brought their best to the table, if I win in any scenario, I know that I brought what the game allows me to bring to the table and the choices of my character that I've made within the confines of the game to the table, and I won. And that's just what I enjoy as relaxation from a PvP experience.
I kind of echo that, and to speak to this directly for me personally, I'm in a similar camp, and my camp is more evolved from the fairest PvP available in FPS games, because that's what I kind of grew up in the gaming world playing, and it comes from those config files, and I never wanted to be in a scenario where I practiced the game in a way that wouldn't be okay in the competitive environment, so I just never got used to doing these kinds of things. And it's really boils down to, can something affect the game and should it, right? Because mouse software now has the ability to macro things into it. Now you have monitors that have the ability to put crosshairs in the middle of the screen or their own correcting. You have graphics cards that can now, fix or change. Fix is an interesting word there. I didn't mean that. That can modify graphics for you outside of the game. So can it and should it? That's the hard question in all of this. So where I kind of come down on it is, if the game doesn't allow you to make the correction, I don't think that you should be able to do it with third-party software. And that's just my opinion on it. Now, again, I know people that play with this stuff. They're not bad people. I also don't fault people for trying to find an advantage. The other thing is, there's a lot of people that would see a Reddit thread or something that says, hey, if you're having problems spotting an enemy, try these settings in your Nvidia control panel. Oh, cool, I'm going to click through that and do it. Oh, I'm spotting people better. I don't think it's a conscious decision by a lot of people to say, oh man, I'm going to go cheat. I'm going to go change all these settings. So I don't think it's as clear-cut as people like to make it. But I'm in the camp of, I just don't use third-party software to modify my game, because to Eric's point, like, if I go into factory and I stomp you out, I want to know that we were on the same playing field and that you were at your best, I was at my best, and I came out on top. And, sometimes I forget a chess piece, but that's how it goes. You were better than me. You remembered your chess piece, Scav, whatever. But I just come back to, this is a challenging issue, and I really do think it's cool that Battlestate is sort of taking a stance on here and sort of letting Nvidia take a little bit of the heat. But I do like that they're doing it, because I would love it if it was just fair PvP. Like, you don't want to question if the person killing you was cheating or using some kind of advantage. And you brought up a point that is so, like, it's tearing me up inside thinking about it, because you said in WoW, there was an add-on, like PvP add-ons, that became so critical to being used that you basically couldn't avoid it at some point. And I think the biggest challenge with Tarkov is this game is so hard to get into. And it's so easy to wonder, where was that guy? How did he kill me? Was he speed cheating? Could he get there? Could he hit that shot? That I could see a pretty easy path of thinking that would say, man, I really need to do something to improve my ability to see them, because I just can't see the enemies where they're shooting me from. So it's like, I mean, that's kind of similar here. I could see how people can get there. So for the future, for where I stand now, yep, no third-party stuff. I don't like it. I know people do it. I'm okay with it. I've dealt with it for 20 years in FPS games. But I'm excited to see what Battlestate does with this, because I think they have an opportunity to really set it up and control what I think they should be controlling. And then it just sets the landscape up if they ever do want to add in a competitive arena or esports type thing to Tarkov, which it could be. We don't know. This is sort of the, foundational sort of steps they need to take.